This week, former President Donald Elizabeth Trump was charged with 13 additional felonies in Georgia, bringing the grand total to over 90, like about 91.
I think it's 91.
Felony charges in 4 criminal cases in 4 different jurisdictions. The charges include violations of the Espionage Act, stealing nuclear secrets, violating Georgia's Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO Act, and conspiracy to defraud the United States in an attempt to overthrow the government, effectively normalizing violence against American institutions and our democracy itself. Meanwhile, in Florida, where Democrats never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity, Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber, a Democrat, himself a former Florida state representative, a former Florida state senator, a former assistant U.S. attorney who for nearly a decade helped prosecute public corruption cases. Did I mention he's a Democrat? He wrote an op-ed in the Miami Herald, the headline of which reads, "For the good of the country, President Biden should pardon Donald Trump."
Yeah, you can kiss my ass.
Oh, that's a cart, if ever there was one. Our guest co-host today, and Because Miami, is immigration activist Tomas Kennedy. Tomas, what do you make of this?
Well, I want to tell the viewers, if you're in Miami Beach and you see that Dan Gelber name with the D next to it on the ballot, don't be fooled, because that D doesn't really stand for Democrat. It actually stands for developer based on his actions. I just think it's just ridiculous, in this country where we all know, common sense people know, we have a 2-tier criminal justice system that lets the powerful, the rich, the politically connected get away with pretty much everything. And we see it in this city all the time. You talk about it all the time. Yeah. You have the mayor of a failing city trying to get protagonism out of it, writing this ridiculous op-ed, and where he acknowledges that Donald Trump did it and is guilty of the crimes, but because of some misconstrued nonsense argument about healing the country, says that we should let him get away with it. It's insane.
Let's hear what Dan Gelber has to say about this. Mayor, thank you for joining us. I've read it several times. In the interest of expediting things, I believe your position boils down to Biden should pardon Trump because a trial, potential conviction, and sentencing would exacerbate divisions in the country. Is that essentially your thesis?
That's not an unfair, there's more to it, but I think you were fair in that explanation.
Okay, what more to it is there then? I would say there's less to it, but...
Well, I mean, listen, I think that whether you pardon him now, whether you let it go a little bit, I think you're right, though. At least you're right about what my view is, because I don't think there's a question about whether he's guilty. I think it's pretty clear from what he has said publicly and what in the details of the indictments that he did what the indictments say he did. And it's not a question whether the crimes are serious. They clearly are. For me, the question is, will 2 or 3 or 4 years of motions and trials heal our nation or make us more divided?
Well, the alleged crimes are not simply serious. They're among the most serious crimes I think you could possibly charge in the history of the country, particularly for a former commander-in-chief. But I'm curious, is this just like a heckler's veto here that we let 30% of one political party basically threaten and intimidate their way out of legal accountability here? If you have a big enough cult following, you're off the hook?
Look, that's a very fair argument, and I think people will have that lens. A lot of people, probably my daughters, have the lens that you have on this, as they've told me. But I think there's a whole nother lens, which is a practical one. And I think it's a serious one, by the way. I used to think that the greatest threat to a democracy, our democracy, was, Al-Qaeda or a nuclear suitcase or Russia or something like that. And now I think it is our divisions. And I've been talking about this for years now because they've only seemed to be getting worse. It doesn't seem like, as I said in the article, a pendulum coming back. It feels a lot like a vortex. And obviously Trump has used a lot of those divisions, has fostered them, has fomented them. And to me, the only question is whether this 2 or 3 years of Trump trials and Trump sentencings or Trump motions will move us to a better place, or whether it will simply exacerbate these divisions, which I think are both serious and potentially fatal to our country. So for me, it's just, you may be right. Billy, you may be right that the best way to put Trump behind us is to put him in jail for 20 years. But isn't
at least to give him the you've already said he's guilty now. I don't even know that's true. I think he's entitled to his day. I think he's entitled to his day in court. I also think that we're entitled, Democrats and Republicans alike, to our day in court. To paraphrase Nixon, shouldn't we know if our president is a crook? Isn't that the criminal justice system that we have in this country?
Great point, but I would just say this. First of all, not all the indictments are the Manhattan, I think we would agree, is not like the others in any way. But the others are very serious, and certainly the Fulton County one as well, wouldn't even apply because obviously President Biden can't pardon for that.
Right.
But I think that I don't really see this as a close question of whether he did it or not. Most of this stuff has been public. I mean, we sat through an impeachment hearing and we watched and listened to it all. And by the way, in the federal trials, you won't even get to watch it or hear it because obviously in federal court you don't have.
You brought up the impeachment trial. In the second trial, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell voted to not convict Trump. And he said, quote, "Impeachment was never meant to be the final forum for American justice. We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation, and former presidents are not immune from being held accountable by either one." So McConnell says the political world isn't where to handle this. It should be handled in the criminal justice world. You're saying it shouldn't be handled in the criminal justice world. It should be handled in the political world. So there's no institution that can hold a man responsible for 91 felonies in this country.
Can I say something, Billy?
This is a very unique. Let me ask you a question,
please.
Do you think? And by the way, I'm not trying to convince you're wrong because I'm not so committed to my position that I think that I'm absolutely right. But I think that anyone on the other side shouldn't be so committed either. What do you think will happen in 2 to 3 years of trials and sentencings if they happen, or retrials and motions? Do you think this is going to exacerbate divisions in our country, or do you think they're going to heal them?
The first thing I would say is that I think a pardon would not, this isn't like, he's not going to follow Burdick v. U.S., that the acceptance of a presidential pardon is tantamount to an admission of guilt, which is what really President Ford relied upon when he pardoned Nixon. But Trump is not, nor is he going to be grateful, nor is he going to say, I admitted I was guilty. He's going to seek revenge. Will he's going to say this was a witch hunt. It will embolden him, Mr. Mayor. It will embolden him.
No, you know what the problem is here, Mayor? You know what the problem is here? Yeah. This is all speculation and politicking and punditry and positioning. At the end of the day, what we deserve is justice beyond the possibility of healing or not healing, because we can make the argument either way. But what we need is accountability and justice against a man that has gotten away with breaking the law his whole life and is so entitled and thinks that he can get away with it that he attested to our democracy. And I'll say, I come from a country, Argentina, where we had a military dictatorship that disappeared people. And I'm proud to say, unlike a lot of other Latin American countries, we actually put a lot of those military junta leaders on trial, and they ended up dying in jail or on trial. And if we don't do this now, if we did what we did with Richard Nixon, which is pardoning criminality and undemocratic behavior and corruption, they will keep doing it, and they will keep doing it, and they will keep doing it until the problem exacerbates and we don't have a democracy anymore.
Well, Mr. Mayor, at the risk of
I still haven't had an answer.
At the risk of following up your question with a question, another circus trial and a mess that will further divide the country is the prosecution of Hunter Biden. Should President Biden pardon his son, Hunter Biden? No. I don't think any sane Republican or Democrat would suggest such a thing. So let's go down the Dan Gelber slippery slope here. Okay. Who else is covered?
You still haven't answered my question.
Who else is covered by your second? I think. Okay. I think D-Day. I think D-Day will only further exacerbate the war, Mr. Mayor. But do we not pursue justice? Do we not do the right thing? I think the risks of not pursuing this, the risks of following a terrible precedent, the Nixon precedent, by the way, which you mentioned in your tweet, if we could bring the tweet up, I think doesn't even apply here, because in that case, first and foremost, Nixon resigned in disgrace. Second, he had no intention of ever running for office again. And finally, the Republican Party of that era, to their credit, would never he would never win a primary. He would never win that nomination. Okay, but here's my question is, who else is covered by the Gelber second justice system that you're proposing, this heckler's veto immunity? Who else do you pardon? What if unindicted co-conspirators in the federal cases get indicted? Do you pardon Giuliani? How about the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers who were already convicted of seditious conspiracy against the United States, who were incited by President Trump? They didn't act alone. We watched that happen on television. Do you convict and imprison everyone else for conspiracy against this country, except the man at the top?
Want me to? I get the point. You want me to respond?
Please.
Look, there's obviously Trump stands apart as unique. He does, in the fact that he has really, in many ways, become one of the greatest dividers in our country. But I still go back to my initial lens, because a lot of the points you make are good points. And by the way, I frankly have thought them myself over the years that, maybe the best thing for us to do is to prosecute him every way we can, because that's the best thing for the country. But I think there has to be another look at this, because nobody's answered the question sufficiently to me. Do you think that 2 to 3 years of this spectacle, we will leave our country
I did, Mayor.
I did. More or less divided.
I did. My answer is it doesn't matter, because justice is more important. The law is more important.
Because, by the way, in a lot of other countries,
to me,
in less mature democracies, the notion of the ruling party prosecuting the opposition leader is something that's well known and, frankly, sort of perilous.
I'm sorry, but Brazil, France, Israel, South Korea, former leaders of these democratic nations had been put on trial and imprisoned. So while it may be unprecedented in the United States, and whose fault is that? The Republicans' fault. It's Gerald Ford's fault. That's not true in mature democracies, to counter what you put in your op-ed.
But it's also pretty common in much less mature democracies. And by the way, I wrote this because I've been writing things like this for some time. I've been asking to open up primaries because I think the country's too divided.
I agree on that.
But at some point, we really have to look at this, because if you play this forward, if you really just play it forward like it's a play, what do you think is going to happen? And I don't know what's going to happen, by the way. Obviously, you're right. There's a lot of wondering and just thinking out loud what could happen. But I think what really could happen is that we could end up spending 2 or 3 years focused entirely on simply this spectacle that repeatedly just continues to entrench our divides, increase our divides. And it is different than Watergate, 100%. But by the way, Watergate was a different time. We didn't have the fake news. We had Walter Cronkite. Everybody believed him. We didn't have all these algorithms telling us what we wanted to hear. It is what's happening in our country right now. I think we would all agree is incredibly concerning to anyone who thinks that this, is a good country, because right now I've never seen anything like this. I was a teenager in the Watergate era, so I remember it. I was a teenager and I was a young kid in Vietnam, in the aftermath of it. But I've never seen our country not simply so divided, but so apparently in a trajectory where those divisions will only be entrenched and will be furthered. And so the only lens I had with this article and with this point is, at what point do we say this path is going to just make things worse? I understand that there's a rule of law to be vindicated. Look, I was a corruption federal prosecutor. I was an associate independent counsel. So I've been on the other side. I ran the U.S. Senate's Investigations Committee. So I've been involved in these public kind of hearings. But none of those other things compare to the state of our nation right now and what's next.
But whose fault? But whose fault is that? And what if Trump is acquitted?
You can't just say if it's their fault, Billy. Well, then they're going to get whatever happens, it's on them. I don't want to be the president of the "I told you so" club. I want to try to figure out what is the best route. and what will help our country heal, or at least not as divided.
The thing is that,
and I don't know the answer, but
this is a man who is the leader of the Republican Party, who has explicitly stated in writing that he believes he can suspend the Constitution. Weeks before the 2020 election, he called on his attorney general via tweet to arrest his political opponent and his family. You have to have a spine to stand up to this kind of lawlessness.
Yeah, can I say something?
Shocking behavior without a question. But again,
so isn't the ultimate division here? Isn't the clear and present danger that he's running for president again, and then we might have this commander in chief?
Beyond that.
By the way,
Mayor, we have millions.
I happen to think he wants to be indicted.
We have millions of Americans that suffer unjust treatment under a two-tier criminal justice system. What kind of message are we sending to these people when this guy, who you acknowledge on your op-ed, is guilty of what he committed and has been committing fraud and illegality for decades? We just say, fuck it. 30% of the country might storm federal buildings if we don't indict them.
They're going to do it
Let
anyway.
Them go. Like, that is not fair to the American public.
By the way, Billy, what you just said is a very fair response, which is, well, if I thought that it was going to happen anyway, no matter what, I would say, well, we might as well take the route you're suggesting, which is prosecute him to the full extent of the law and let him sit in a gulag for decades. But if there's a chance that some action can tamp down those divides, or at least not exacerbate them, I just think it's worth looking at. This is not a crazy point. Okay, even though I've gotten, even my own children have given me a hard time about it, it's not, I think it's worth thinking about, because I don't know why all of us aren't thinking about the one thing that's most important, because it's very easy to say all the terrible things he did and how there needs to be a vindication of justice. That's easy to say.
That's easy?
But the point is, we're here right now at this point.
I'm sorry, you prosecuted public corruption cases. You know it's not easy to make a public corruption case. It's not even easy to sell one through the DOJ or the U.S. Attorney's
Ask Catherine
office.
Fernandez-Rundle.
Who never prosecutes legitimate public corruption cases and hasn't prosecuted a police officer for non-duty killing in 30 years in office, for crying out loud. So I just don't understand. All right. I do want to.
You went down a rabbit hole right there. Come back, please come back, and let's talk about this.
Well, here's my question. What happens when there is a superseding indictment? Jack Smith is continuing to investigate. What happens if he finds that the missing Iran attack documents were shared or sold, as has been theorized, with the Saudis? Like, what do you give him a free pass for that too? I'm wondering where your slippery slope leads us.
By the way, look, I don't really view it as a slippery slope. I don't, because you're applying it to things I'm really, look, I think Trump stands aside is very unique. I think the federal government trying the opposition leader is something that has some peril to it. But I think, and I don't disagree that what he did was horrible. I think in the documents case, it felt like he wanted to get indicted because all he had to do was turn him over, and he just refused to do that. So obviously, this is somebody who has done nothing but create disorder, disrepute, and obviously committed crimes. But that's not the point I'm making. Is as we stand here today, with knowing what's behind us and knowing what could be in front of us, do we think 2 to 3 years of these, sort of public spectacle prosecutions may be a good thing, but will they be possibly a bad thing? Because at the end of the day, we're going to be a country that will never have the ability to be anything other than divided and entrenched. Will this be so fracturing to us that it's just not going to matter? And I don't think that saying, well, it'll be their fault if that happens is an answer, because from my point of view, it doesn't really matter whose fault it is. When I was the Democratic leader in the state legislature, I used to always say, I don't want to be the president of the I told you so club.
A prosecutor who believes it doesn't matter whose fault it was, a man who has been accused of stealing top secret nuclear secrets and war plans and refused to return them.
I confess that all those things you're saying, I don't disagree with them, but I get back to my point, and I really don't think you guys have answered it, which is, you think the next 2 or 3 years will make us better, worse, or the same? From a national,
I think from a national and an international standpoint, it is important that the United States of America stands up for the rule of law, says that no one is above the law, and holds everyone accountable for serious potential crimes against the United States of America. And this op-ed should be to you what the Munich Agreement was to Neville Chamberlain. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for joining us.
You were waiting for that.
We had to end on something. So
okay.
thank you for your time. And enjoy your vacation. Things are going great in Miami Beach, by the way. It's not like biker gangs have taken over the town or anything. Thanks for your time.
I know about that. Thanks, Bill. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gentlemen, what the was that?
I'm not sure. It's so rare that we get elected officials on this show. It was exciting to have that opportunity, particularly to have Mayor Gelber on to defend that absolutely, apparently, according to him, indefensible op-ed. All I heard him say was, you guys are right. You make a good point.
Then why make the op-ed?
My daughters agree with you. So that's my question is that, okay, so Gelber
kept
is
telling
nearing...
us we didn't answer the question that we totally answered.
That we totally answered.
That.
And so Gelber is nearing the end of his third and final term as Miami Beach mayor. Nobody would say that Miami Beach is better off now than we were 6 years ago. Why did he do this? Is this like just a desperate grasp at relevance? Florida Democrats, who, as I said, never miss an opportunity, are always grasping for maybe moderation. Maybe I can hold this op-ed up as something that helps me run for statewide office, because he's run for Attorney General of the state before. Attorney General that would not prosecute public corruption. Apparently,
I don't know.
Crazy.
He might really believe this, but I think he probably wants to run statewide and needs to go to Liberty County and be like, hey, I'm a moderate. Blah blah blah. Was the voice of reason. My thing is, look, Billy, it's like you said, Miami Beach, out of control rents, out of control flooding, out of control towing companies,
out of control crime,
out of control corruption, out of control developers. You know what I mean? Please, enough of this. You have a job to do in Miami Beach. With respect, Mayor, please.
It's like the quintessential social media meme. It's like nobody, absolutely nobody, Dan Gelber. Biden should pardon Trump. Who asked him?
You go to Miami Beach, 1 out of 3 retail stores are empty. They're closed.
Yeah.
Dude,
I call Washington Avenue For Lease Boulevard, because that's what every sign on every block says.
Yeah.
For lease. I want to stop talking about this guy. I don't want to stop talking about Donald Trump, because there's much more important fear and Florida men on the campaign trail.
I was right in the middle of a reptile zoo, and somebody was giving booze to these goddamn things.
I'm going to keep hammering this issue of education and the deconstruction or the destruction of public school education in the state of Florida. I'm a product of the Miami-Dade County public school system.
Yeah, we've seen that.
And
You're goddamn right, meatball.
But the situation is getting worse. Kids are going back to school this week, and they are the victims here. They are the collateral damage in the woke wars, and Florida is the perpetual, laboratory of democracy. The Florida of today is the America of tomorrow, and these kids are the lab rats that are caught in the crossfire of this culture war. And it's absolutely deplorable. We talked a little bit about PragerU last week, which Elie Mystal brilliantly referred to as audio blackface. But it gets far worse, because PragerU, in their what they proudly advertise as indoctrination education for children, they have cartoons that the scripts are written by the fossil fuel and coal industries. And the talking points are absolute, utter climate change denialism. Here with record heat in Miami, you have crap like this.
Anya's parents are proud of her hard work. But when her anxiety gets high and she tells them that fossil fuels will soon lead to a climate disaster, they encourage her to consider how the planet has been warming and cooling since prehistoric times, long before carbon emissions were a factor. Can she explain that? They ask her if everyone in Poland stops using coal. Will that lower Earth's temperature? Especially when countries like China and India burn many times the amount of coal as Poland and are not cutting back. Unlike coal or fossil fuels, energy from wind or sun is unreliable, expensive, and difficult to store.
Like so many people, Joseph used to believe that wind and solar energy was the obvious answer.
So, yes, fighting oppression always takes courage. I mean, Holocaust exploitation. They compare climate change to communism in another part of the video. China and India don't do anything to save the earth, so we shouldn't do anything either. Solar and wind don't work. They talk about because the batteries go dead and like it's not always windy and sunny out. So, dude, this
is a death cult. These people want to kill us all.
Yeah, 97% of scientists agree on this, and this is deliberate climate denialism, propaganda, grooming, indoctrination
in Florida. In Florida. I mean, have you seen the Brian McColmy, whatever his name is? Yeah. His Twitter feed is depressing. Every day is record breaking. We're all going to die. And he's right. I mean, he is right.
Oh, sorry. I did all three. Oh, no. I did it again.
God damn it, Billy. Stop.
Mother. All right. I'm sorry about that. We try to keep the
PG, sorry.
The Fs to
See, this is like the time Luther Campbell was on local radio and he said the N-word 3 times in a row.
Well, you don't have like 3 7-second delays. So you're like a 21-second delay there.
No, that's a fine.
See how I did that math really quick?
Yeah.
Impressive. Sevens. Thank you.
That's great.
So also, Tomas, my name is William. Legally, I was born William. You're Tomas.
Yeah, William Cohen.
In Florida schools, if I wanted to be called Billy instead of William, or my mother wanted to call me Billy instead of William, or you wanted to be called Tom.
People call me Tommy.
Or Tommy. Your parents in Florida now have to sign a permission form to call you anything other than the name that is on your birth certificate.
That'll fix a property insurance crisis.
Priorities, bro.
You're goddamn right, Meatball.
Unbelievable.
Little Billy Corben.
I was a little late. On that one. Sorry about that. But, and also, right here a little bit closer to home, the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, they just banned a book. They quote unquote weeded it out. This is a book called Daddy's Roommate. It was published in 1990. It's a children's book that the whole spirit of the thing can be summed up in this line. Being gay is just one more kind of love, and love is the best kind of happiness. And according to the Miami-Dade County Public Schools, it's been yanked from the libraries where they found it for, quote, adult content or sexually charged language.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Gay people exist, trans people exist. It's just a reality. We need to teach that to children. And the message is beautiful. Love is love, no matter who you love.
Even though they weren't gay, I wonder how they would feel about the TV show My Two Dads.
Banned in Florida. Absolutely banned from
Poor Paul
Florida.
Reiser.
Well, he's not going to get those residuals, and they should go on strike.
You know, I was actually reading a story. They asked Ron DeSantis, what would you do if your children turn out to be gay or trans? And he said, that's between my wife and I. What disgusting. I mean, the correct answer is I love my children no matter what.
Hey, all you homophobes and racists and anti-Semites out there, we've got a complaint line for you to call, and man, would we love to hear from you. 786-505-9842. Pick up the phone right now. Leave us a voicemail. 786-505-9842. Call now. Last week, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis removed the state attorney from Central Florida, the Orlando area, Monique Worrell, from office for seemingly no reason other than that she was an elected Democrat in the state. DeSantis has removed at least, by my count, a dozen elected officials from office, most of them, if not Democrats, from predominantly Democratic parts of the state. It also seems to me that all the Republicans he's removed from office were actually charged with crimes, whereas a great many of the Democrats were in fact not. In the case of the state attorney for Hillsborough County, which is the 4th largest county in Florida, its population is in fact larger than 12 entire states in the U.S. Andrew Warren was reelected in 2020, beating his Republican opponent by nearly a 7-point margin. He was removed from office last year by Governor DeSantis, being accused of incompetence and neglect of duty. But the only example cited in the executive order suspending Andrew Warren was a letter that he signed, along with dozens of prosecutors across the country, pledging that he'd avoid prosecuting cases stemming from Florida's 15-week abortion ban and potential bans on gender-affirming care that, quote, you'd refrain from using limited criminal legal system resources to criminalize personal medical decisions end quote. Joining us now is the former state attorney, Andrew Warren. Counselor, thanks so much for joining us. You just this past June, the Florida Supreme Court rejected your effort to get your job back. All the justices who voted against you in this 6-1 decision, incidentally, or not incidentally, were appointed by Governor DeSantis, but they didn't exactly address the merits of your case, did they?
No, they didn't. I mean, first, thanks for having me on to talk about this. It's a really important issue, not just for Hillsborough County, but for democracy across the state of Florida. So as you said, the Florida Supreme Court dismissed our case without even addressing the merits. And the bigger point here is a federal judge had previously said that what the governor did to me was illegal. Now, that's not my opinion. That's a fact. A federal judge found that the suspension violated state and federal law, that I hadn't done anything wrong, and that there was no legal basis to suspend me. The problem is it's been a year and I still remain out of office.
And U.S. District Judge Robert Hinkle, back in January already, it's now nearly September, ruled that Governor DeSantis' suspension of you violated both the Florida Constitution and the United States Constitution. However, he said that he lacked the authority to reinstate you, thus not only disenfranchising you, but disenfranchising the hundreds of thousands of Floridians and tampons who voted for you in a free and fair democratic election. What is the remedy now? I mean, if the governor was found to violate both the state and United States constitutions, now what? How is that allowed to stand?
Well, in terms of the case, I mean, we've appealed that decision because we believe that the judge was wrong in concluding that he didn't have the jurisdiction to reinstate me after finding that what the governor did was illegal. But when you say, what do we do about it? Well, what we do about it is we have a governor who cares about the rule of law. And unfortunately, right now in Florida, our governor, DeSantis, does not care about the rule of law, period, full stop. I mean, he has violated the rights of the people whose rights he is sworn to uphold countless times. He's championed and passed legislation that is unconstitutional. Again, that's been found by courts to be unconstitutional. He has suspended elected officials. That's been found to be illegal. He's done so many things that just makes you wonder whether he even cares about the law or really just appears to care about it when it's convenient for his own political ambition.
And we seem to hear a lot from particularly his political party. We hear people talking about the weaponization of government, autocracy, dictatorships, and they're talking about the Biden administration, the DOJ, Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis. But, I mean, could there be anything less democratic, more autocratic, more an example of the weaponization of government than a governor who continuously removes elected officials from office?
I mean, not really, no. I mean, this is a direct attack on one of the most fundamental principles of America, which is that the voters decide who gets to serve in office. And it's totally hypocritical to hear the governor and other Republicans across the country talk about some of these issues. You know, it's one thing to say, I believe in the rule of law. I believe in the criminal justice process. I believe in our law enforcement. Okay. Then when law enforcement conducts an investigation and indicts somebody through the grand jury process, then let's let the facts play out. Let's let these cases play out where people have been charged with crimes. And if you believe it's political, then that will come out in the end and they'll be acquitted. But for the governor to say that other people are weaponizing the judicial process where he has broken the law, and again, that's not my opinion, a fact as a judge found, that he's broken the law to remove elected officials like me from office, I don't know how he can stand there and say that he cares one damn about the rule of law in this state.
You know, speaking of politics and things being political, a number of polls are finding that DeSantis' campaign continues to plummet. He is behind in the polls behind Ramaswamy. He's behind in the polls with Chris Christie. There was a poll yesterday. How much do you think this stuff, the removal of elected officials like yourself and the removal of Monique Worrell, particularly in Orange County, is correlated to the governor's need for attention, particularly in right-wing media, and just him trying to find any means to exert himself in the headlines and in these like right-wing news channels?
It's a great question. Look, I have a 9-year-old at home, and when she's upset about something that somebody else did or she's not getting sufficient attention, she throws a tantrum. Our governor has done the same. He's thrown unconstitutional tantrums to try to get attention, to resuscitate his floundering presidential campaign. And that's exactly what happened with State Attorney Worrell. I mean, it's no coincidence that the day after he has to do his third or fourth reboot of his campaign and get a new campaign manager, they end up, issuing this executive order.
Does it track, to your knowledge, in the dozen or so elected officials that he's removed? It seems that the only Republicans he's removed is there's a much higher bar there. They have to be criminally charged in order for him to finally do his job. He doesn't seem to find incompetence or neglect of duty, even when it's flagrant with Republican elected officials.
Well, because he's not looking for it, right? I mean, he's using this as a pretext to remove people that he doesn't like, or people whose policies he doesn't like, or people elected by voters he doesn't like. But this is not a fiefdom. This is not the dictatorship of Ron DeSantis. The last I checked, this is still the state of Florida. And if it's supposed to be the free state of Florida, it certainly isn't free to the elected officials who have been removed, to the voters who have had their votes taken away, to the people who have had democracy stripped from them and the right to elect their own officials. And I mean, this is a huge problem for the state of Florida. When are we going to say enough is enough and stand up to this man who is clearly willing to violate the rule of law whenever it's politically convenient for him to do so?
And to bring it full circle, the justification he used to remove you, duly elected official, from office, it strikes me in the ongoing theme of hypocrisy here, that your position in the signing of this pledge was an argument for conservatism. It was an argument for small government. It was an argument that government and the criminal justice system should not get involved in people's private, personal, medical decisions. Is that, to your knowledge, the only excuse that he's given to remove you from office? And what was your position in signing that pledge?
Well, the governor's given a lot of excuses, but all of them failed, as the court found. So I signed, as you said, a letter that was really pushing back against the rush to criminalize abortion after the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. And in Florida, we had the 15-week law that was passed, and that law is currently under a constitutional challenge. But this was a way for me to say, look, this is not the best use of prosecutorial resources. And there was a letter I signed about pushing back on discrimination against transgender Americans, saying we really don't want to use the criminal justice system, and we shouldn't, for policy reasons, be using the criminal justice system to prosecute people and discriminate against people based on their gender identity. And the governor said, oh, that's enough. We're going to remove you from office. That shows you're incompetent. Again, a court said that was ridiculous. They sort of laughed that out of court. But the problem is, I'm still out of the job that I was elected to do by, the 1.5 million people here in Hillsborough County.
Yeah. So why are you still out of a job? How are you getting your job back?
Well, we're fighting to get my job back. I mean, we've been fighting since day one of the suspension, which was, 375 days ago now. We filed a suit in federal court. We've talked about that, how the judge sided with us, but said he couldn't reinstate me. We filed in state court.
Can you go into that? Why can't they reinstate you? If this is so blatantly illegal. Like, it's crazy.
Well, the short of it is that the judge said that he didn't have the power to reinstate me, and I should go to state court, because he said that this was more of a state court issue than a federal court issue, even though there was a violation of both federal law and state law. But the problem with that is when, one, we went into state court and the state judges said, we're not going to deal with this. But the other thing is, it doesn't just go to me and my position, right? It's the idea that anytime someone has their rights violated, if they have a constitutional right violated under the First Amendment like I did, then there is, in our opinion, recourse under federal law. And so it's sort of strange for a judge to say, well, you're right on the law and this was illegal, but I can't do anything. But again, that's why there's an appeal, and I have faith in the judicial process that this will work out.
The nexus of your points about hypocrisy and about the allocation of limited resources as a prosecutor, we're hearing a lot from the former president's party, the Republican Party, about how Fani Willis should be dedicating her limited resources to violent crime, right? And to people who are well, I was going to say racketeering and corrupt organizations, but I think that's exactly what she is doing. In the meantime, Counselor, I hope that you get some rest on your Ruth Bader Ginsburg pillows there, and hopefully you'll have dreams of justice. And hope to have you back again soon. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
It's time once again for the Because Miami Wheel of Despair. Roy, what are our topics this week?
Boys, we got a Whopper. We got a whole bunch of Whoppers, actually. We got Whoppers with bacon and barbecue sauce on it. Kitty porn.
Oh, God.
Life Wallet sued for being a Ponzi scheme.
Oh.
An anti-immigrant bill.
We have biometric technology.
100,000 people moving out of Miami. And 137 degree sand.
Wow.
Some hot sand. All right.
Roy, let's spin the wheel.
All right. It is officially landed on an anti-immigrant bill.
There was...
Wait for the sound, please. Thank you.
Sorry. And what dumb luck that we have Florida's...
We have an immigrant? Where?
Florida's favorite immigrant.
This wasn't
activist. Activist and immigrant.
Not a rigged rule at all.
Rigged at all.
It's not like we planned it or anything.
Yeah.
Tomas, there was an article in the Miami Herald this week from Mary Ellen Class about the legendary chain of Cuban restaurants called Columbia Restaurant in Tampa, Florida, the Florida of Florida. And this guy was forced to fire like 19 employees because of the new anti-immigrant bill that you have so passionately, you've been on this program and all over the state of Florida, protested against. Tell me about this story. This is so bizarre.
You know, I think it's an interesting story because it highlights some of the problems that this bill has caused, mainly the worker shortages that are now acknowledged by Republican lawmakers who voted for this bill and are now begging immigrants to stay behind closed doors. Right?
And in this case, Republican business owners.
Yeah. Well, that's what actually pissed me off about this story, because if you read it, the guy actually says, I'm a strong supporter of Ron DeSantis, and I continue to be, but I think now he's gone too far. And it perfectly illustrates the conservative right-wing mentality that it's like, I don't give a shit what happens to other people until it happens to me, until I have to fire the people that I have had in my restaurants, probably with minimal labor protections, paying them wages. Now I have to fire them and I can't get new employees and it's affecting my bottom line. All of a sudden, he's gone too far.
Right. I thought the anti-immigrant bill was for Democrats, not for Republican business owners. It reminds me of the famous meme. I never thought leopards would eat my face, says man who voted for leopards eating people's faces party.
Exactly.
Roy, spin the wheel. What was that?
It landed on kitty porn.
Should that sound effect follow?
It follows everything that we do on this show.
Oh, man. Well, turns out Miami Mayor Francis Suarez's communications director, remember Rene Pedrosa? This week, he was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison for child porn after he lured a teen boy to City Hall. And then he groped him in the mayor's conference room. The city paid the boy $100,000 settlement in taxpayer money to basically cover it up. But the guy is now going to be a registered sex offender. And Francis Suarez literally turned City Hall into a crime scene.
If you put garbage in, you're going to get garbage out.
I wonder if Dan Gelber thinks we should pardon him too to heal the divisions at City of Miami.
We have to heal these divisions. These divisions are spreading fast and wide.
Also, Francis, where are our gift cards?
Did you donate $1?
I donated $1 just to see if I would get a gift card.
Francis Suarez is desperate. His like lottery masquerading as a presidential campaign. Yeah, this lottery that he's running. So you could buy. He's complaining about Bidenomics and how everything's more expensive in America, and yet he was selling $20 Visa gift cards for a $1 donation to his campaign that you made.
I wanted to see if I would get a gift card because so many people online are complaining about it. I haven't gotten my gift card. A lot of people haven't gotten the gift cards. Where are or gift cards.
You gave him $1.
Yeah, unfortunately,
which doesn't equal the amount that's on the card.
I'm supposed to get 19 back. It's
right.
It's the art of the deal, baby.
By the way, thanks Bidenomics, because if you can, everything's not more expensive if you can buy a $20 Visa gift card for $1.
Surplus.
Art of the deal, baby. Let's go.
But talk about a Ponzi scheme. Where the hell?
Where is my gift card?
Is your gift card?
Yeah.
Roy, I'm just going to press all of the Francis.
Just not at the same time.
Mr. Mayor, you're brilliant. You were super smart.
Roy, let's spin the wheel of despair.
Landed on 100,000 people moving out of the city of Miami.
Bye. That's what I say. This is kind of messed up because so between 2020 and 2022, while Florida, the state of Florida, gained over 700,000 new residents, an analysis of the U.S. Census Bureau data by the Brookings Institute shows that Miami-Dade lost nearly 100,000 people moved TF. Can I say TF, Roy?
Sure.
Moved TF out of Miami. ¿Por qué, Tomas? Why?
Because you can't buy a home. If you buy a home, you can't get it insured. The traffic is insane. The heat is just drives you crazy. The corruption. I mean, the quality of life is declining precipitously, and as we've talked about, I won't go into it, but I am moving myself pretty soon. It's just not a place where you can buy a home, you can build generational equity. It's just too expensive. The quality of life is not great.
But look at the bright side.
In Miami, we are definitely not woke.
And I will say this, if you move out of Miami, who is going to yell and heckle Ron DeSantis?
The powerful will sleep slightly better.
Because they're not woke.
Yeah.
They're definitely not woke.
We're being priced out of our town. I'm Argentinian, but I grew up here, and it's really sad. They're pricing us out. They're squeezing us out. And the political class on both parties, at the municipal level and at the state level, they don't give.
Why are you such a hater?
Sorry.
I thought that, what about all the hype? It's a tech hub. It's the crypto capital. It's the capital of capital.
It'll make Miami coin will make you a millionaire if you were a billionaire, as you'd say.
So
come invest here.
Miami survived a lot of boom and bust cycles, but it may not survive this bullshit cycle because it's just like 100% pure, uncut mierda. At this point, from the mouths of local politicians, potalitas, real estate hustlers, and chamber cheerleaders. But the truth of the matter is that people cannot afford to live in the homes that they built, that their families have been in for generations. It's crazy.
I saw a billboard driving today in the morning along US 1, and it said, it was a bizarre one, but it said, men love to sleep just as much as Miami loves tiny coffees. And I'm like, okay, this is where we are in the gentrification. We have billboards so the new out-of-towners and the New Yorkers can be like, oh my God, the tiny coffee, the colada. It's no longer for us.
Right.
The advertisements, the commercials, the billboards, so long.
It's like Miami and Epcot. It's more of like a Miami theme restaurant or theme park than it is actually Miami. I mean, listen, we're going to live in a time when there's going to be no more Cubans in Little Havana, no more Haitians in Little Haiti, no more Bahamians in Little Bahamas of the West Grove, no more Dominicans in Little Santo Domingo. I mean, this is what's going to happen.
It's happening.
And for our Miami moment, in case this is the last time we have you in studio before you move out, like before you get deported in the middle of this podcast. If only, Roy's going to deport you for saying dropping those F-bombs.
I'm building the boat right now.
But here is a moment of a Miami moment of zen with our friend and guest co-host for the day, Tomas Kennedy, visiting and trying to ask Governor DeSantis some questions at a press conference.
You guys said you would do, you followed through. You look at